The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 2, Reading and Viewing. It addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to explore and explain key features of texts and how they contribute to meaning. Learners should be able to recognize how word choices, imagery, and sound devices affect mood, meaning, and theme. Learners should also be able to recognize that verse and stanza forms, rhyme, rhythm, and punctuation affect meaning.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. In our previous lesson, we looked at 4 types or forms of poems that you may come across in your English work: ballad, ode, elegy, and haiku. In addition to these forms of poetry, there is one more type of poem that is very important, the sonnet. And before we discuss the sonnet any further, let's look at a definition. Sonnet is a poem that always follows a set structure of 14 lines. It usually deals with one topic, but frequently presents differing ideas on that topic. During the Renaissance, suitors frequently wrote love letters in the form of sonnets to the woman they fancied. As a result, many sonnets in existence deal with the topic of love. Today's equivalent of the sonnet would be the loving SMS messages that are so popular with teenagers. Of course, these don't follow a set rhyme scheme. Remember that during the Renaissance, people became aware of the beauty of life around them. So many sonnets are based on the following topics: love, especially an exploration of the different types of love; nature, with special emphasis on man versus nature, and man's role in the world. For example, fate and predestination. Sonnets are written as a continuous stanza of 14 lines. They always have 14 lines and they always deal with only one subject. You will study sonnets in class, and examiners love testing your understanding of them. I have used the term lyric in reference to the sonnet. You will remember that the word lyric comes from poems that could be sung to a tune played on a lyre. So when a poem is described as a lyric poem, it means that it could be set to music. You will also have heard the term lyric used in conjunction with modern-day music. The lyrics of a song are the words and not the music. William Shakespeare wrote some of the most famous sonnets in the English language. He lived from 1564 to 1616 and wrote his poetry during the Renaissance era. In Italy, a poet called Petrarch was also writing sonnets. Both Shakespeare and Petrarch became well known for the beauty of their writing, and the structure of the sonnets they wrote was popular with the people of the time. Today we are going to learn how to identify the 2 different types of sonnets and why the poets chose to use these 2 different types. Now, the Renaissance first emerged in Italy, so the sonnet got its classical form from the Italian poet Petrarch. So we will start by looking at the features of the Italian or Petrarchan sonnet. You can use either of these terms. Personally, I think it is easier to remember and spell Italian, so that's the term I'll use to refer to this type of sonnet. Typically, the Italian sonnet is 14 lines in length and follows a strict structure. Now, an Italian sonnet is divided into 2 sections that deals with 2 different aspects of the same subject. The sections are known as the octave and the sestet. Can you guess how many lines are in the octave? Well, we know that an octagon is an 8-sided construction, and an octopus has 8 legs. Clearly, the answer is that the octave consists of 8 lines. So, if there are 8 lines in the octave, and the sonnet consists of 14 lines, then clearly there should be 6 lines in the sestet. So the octave plus the sestet adds up to the 14 lines of the sonnet. Even English teachers can sometimes be mathematical geniuses. An Italian sonnet usually poses a problem in the octave. Sometimes it presents some kind of an argument. The sestet will then supply an answer to the problem or a solution or resolution to the argument. Italian sonnets are interesting because it keeps the reader guessing and the subject matter is thought-provoking. I'm going to use this poem, When I Consider How My Light Is Spent, by John Milton, to illustrate the typical rhyme scheme of an Italian sonnet. I will use only the end words of each line for this example. Do you see that lines 1 and 4 rhyme and lines 2 and 3? This pattern is repeated in lines 5 and 8 and 6 and 7. These 8 lines together form the octave. In the octave, the Italian sonnet poses a problem or argument. Now we move on to the sestet. Here the rhyme scheme is different, and in this section we have an answer or solution to the problem in the octave. Here the rhyme scheme is line 9 and 12, 10 and 13 and 11 and 14. Now, although we have separated it into 2 sections for our example, remember that the Italian sonnet is written as a continuous stanza of 14 lines, and the distinction lies in the rhyme and the content. This is the typical rhyme scheme of an Italian sonnet. Now, if you have studied sonnets in class already, try and determine which of the sonnets will fit into this structure. Remember that there are always exceptions to the rule in English, and poets like Keats did not stick to this traditional rhyme scheme. The most important feature of an Italian sonnet is the distinction between the octave and the sestet. Now let's move on to our next sonnet. Shakespearean or Elizabethan sonnet consists of 3 quatrains and a rhyming couplet. That sounds pretty technical, doesn't it? But it is really easy if you think about it. A quatrain is a section of 4 lines, just like a quadrilateral has 4 sides or a quad bike has 4 wheels. You have already learned that a rhyming couplet is 2 lines directly below each other that rhyme. So an Elizabethan sonnet has 3 sections of 4 lines each. The quatrains that are followed by 2 lines that sum up the message of the sonnet or provide a comment by the poet. The couplet. Shakespeare had a great understanding of human nature, and most of his poems dealt with aspects of love or the effects of time on physical beauty. So each quatrain would deal with a different aspect of the same topic. And in the rhyming couplet, we would find Shakespeare's attitude towards this topic. Elizabethan sonnets were so named because Queen Elizabeth I was on the throne of England at the time that Shakespeare wrote most of his sonnets. Now, it really doesn't matter whether you use the term Shakespearean or Elizabethan when referring to this type of sonnet. Now, I would like you to listen to this sonnet by Shakespeare. I want to use it to illustrate to you the traditional rhyme scheme in an Elizabethan or Shakespearean sonnet.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession on that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in the shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
While not every Shakespearean or Elizabethan sonnet fits into this exact rhyme scheme, most of them do. Notice how alternating lines rhyme. In the quatrains, this pattern is repeated. And then the final two lines form the rhyming couplet. The easiest way to differentiate between an Elizabethan and an Italian sonnet is to look for the rhyming couplet at the end. The Italian sonnet definitely does not have one. Because the requirements of a sonnet are so specific, they are very easy to identify, but horribly difficult to write. Try and absorb all the facts you have learnt about sonnets today, because it will really help you to identify and understand sonnets in your classwork and examinations. Now, after all you have learnt about sonnets today, I'm sure that you will have a newfound respect for any poet that has ever written a sonnet. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.